Okay, hi everyone, and thank you for joining us. Oh, I think now we're on. So hi everyone, and thank you for joining us. We're really excited to share with you what we prepared for the webinar today.
And we're going to talk today a lot about innovation, and we're going to focus on, as it says right there, how to set up your team for success.
Let's get started.
Yeah.
So we're going to cover a few things. So we'll introduce ourselves first, and then we're going to define innovation just to give us some context and alignment. Then we're going to talk about the conditions for innovation, how to get started, and then we're going to touch on the innovation framework. And we'll wrap up, and we'll leave some time for questions at the end. So we like to start from the end anyway. So a key takeaway from our conversation today would be this message. If there's one thing you can leave with, it would be this. So we know that there is a lot of buzz around innovation, and a lot of people actually talk about innovation, but doesn't necessarily mean that they are actually doing the work. So just something for us to think about, that innovation is hard, it takes time, and there's no magic recipe for innovation. It is a craft and a journey. And innovation is not just about breakthrough ideas or strategies or new products or slogans even, or when we touch on the organization design, it's not about just changing things up and coming up with new values or even new spaces. So we're going to take the opportunity to talk about what it takes to do innovation work, and we're going to talk about the journey aspect of it.
Yeah, so I think we should start with who we are. So I'm Heather Damrossi, and
I'm Simon Mahana, and we are both innovation designers at The Moment.
And The Moment is an innovation design agency in Toronto. And for those of you who are not in Canada, that's where we are. And our purpose as an organization is to contribute to the development of sustainable, thriving, and prosperous organizations. So we do this type of work on a daily basis. And we're excited to sort of talk you guys through a little bit today about what we've learned over the years and how we like to work with our clients as we do this work.
Yeah, so maybe we start with what is innovation. So maybe a working definition that we can align on from the get-go would be that innovation is the process in which a new idea or invention is translated into a good or service that creates value or for which customers will pay. And to qualify for an innovation, an idea must create value, so it must demonstrate value. It must be replicable, it must be something that we can really produce, implement, and scalable at an economical cost, so taking into consideration the viability and feasibility of it, and must satisfy an existing need or address an emerging one. So as a human-centered design consultancy firm, we definitely focus on the desirability aspect. So we engaged our stakeholders, customers, and other stakeholders within the organization to understand their needs. But beyond that, we move into from the ideation and understanding the needs to thinking also about implementation, which is really key in innovation work. So this is where we touch on feasibility, what is possible to be produced and implemented, what's viable, what would be sustainable for the organization, but also looking at the strategic overall value of the work, of the new product, idea, or strategy, and all of it, and how it's positioned within the organization, but also how it would position the organization within the market. So the combination of all of these factors actually creates innovation.
So yeah, I mean, innovation also involves novel ways of using resources and these human-centered processes that Simon was talking about. So in order to generate new ideas, in order to actually develop the ideas and to implement them. So when we're talking about innovation, we're actually talking about that entire process all the way from, the starting point all the way through to implementing it and having it generate value. So we also want to talk about how it requires the involvement from key stakeholders along the journey. And when we talk about stakeholders, we're talking about people within your organization, also customers, and maybe other sort of knowledge carriers as well. So we also want to touch on sort of what is the sort of number one innovation approach to ensure success. And I'm sure that's why you've all signed up for this webinar. And unfortunately, not to let you down, but there is actually no easy $9.99 solution to innovation, because we don't want to kid ourselves. There's actually no secret recipe for successful, risk-free innovation. When we talk about actually being able to do the work, it is a lot of work. And so that's the key to success, really. The number one innovation approach is that you really have to put the work in. You've got to roll up your sleeves and, you know, really get into it.
Innovation is hard.
It is. So great. Yeah, you know, now we know it's going to be a lot of work, and we all get that. But what we want to talk about is, you know, what do innovation teams need to succeed?
So maybe we can start first talking about maybe the conditions in which or that we require or need to start the innovation work. And touching maybe on the first key aspect, I think we can talk about the skills. So we know that building a business of the future, building those kind of like new and improved value propositions require innovation teams with like diverse skills and also different ways of working. So this is where we talk about really a lot of like collaboration and working across multidisciplinary teams and multidisciplinary skills. So because of the nature of those kind of challenges and complex problems that are really interconnected and they are on a systemic level, we need to look at the skills probably in a different way. We are innovation designers, and we always get the question of like, what is an innovation designer? And the way we position it is that to do innovation work, you need to bring that design perspective along with other perspectives too. So innovation designers kind of draw on a really wide range and diverse toolkits, kind of borrowed from multiple disciplines. And those tools and those different capabilities and experiences come together to really enable and support the teams to working on those challenging, complex problems, and to really help the organization transition into new phases or new places.
And we will talk about how we sort of build those teams a little bit later. And I think it's important to know that, you know, not one single person carries the entire toolkit of capabilities in order to do this. So, I mean, that's impossible. So we like to think about, you know, also how we build up teams when we think about those different types of capabilities that we need on a project.
So to kind of illustrate a little bit more, so we use the language of like I-shaped person and T-shaped person. So the I-shaped person would be the person with like deep expertise, with a lot of experience and focus in one area. And for example, within the innovation space, we talk about research, design, learning, change, and business. And the T-shaped person would also present, in addition to maybe some key pillars in specific areas, they also present a kind of the breadth of knowledge that kind of spans across multiple disciplines. So they are able to speak different languages in a way and kind of bring people to collaborate and work together from like really different disciplines with a good understanding and good knowledge of what is required to do each of these aspects of the work. So at the moment, we created a tool that was first for us internally to kind of understand who we are and what kind of capabilities we bring to the team and to the work. And we share also this resource on our website as a tool that also other practitioners and other designers could also use.
And that tool online actually does break down these different skill sets and talks about, you know, defining them and give some examples and so on. So it's something that, you know, you can also go through and map yourself and map your team and get to know how you might align and how maybe you know, create a full map together.
Yeah, so it gives you a good understanding of who you are, but also if you do it on a team level, you would understand what kind of skills each person would bring with where the level of expertise in each one. So if you want to go to the website at some point and you go to themoment.is, and go to the resources page, you can download the tool, and it's an open source tool, so you can use it, and you have all the information about the different skills, but also how to use the tool. So and then once we talked about the skills, and we're going to talk about maybe learning. So maybe Heather can.
Yeah, I think I can handle this. So when we talk about the conditions for innovation, we really think that learning is important, and that it's an integral component in this journey. And so we really try to create opportunities to learn. And throughout the process, it's a challenge. No matter what project you're on, anytime you do it, because every innovation challenge is unique and is different, there's always an opportunity to learn. And while we're at it, we're learning about the project itself. So we really want to make sure that we hold space for it to happen. Learning is not something that we say it really can't happen at the side of the desk. It's not something that you sort of do the work and then you step out and do a quick opportunity to learn, you come in. It's integral. It's really part of the whole journey. And we think that, it's a key ingredient in the process. So the way that we work is we create joined up teams in order to bring the learning into the innovation process. And the joined up team looks like people from the moment and people from our client team. And actually, while we're going through that process, we're really allowing space for learning to happen. And we set up learning goals right from the get-go of a project, and we make sure that we circle back to them throughout our journey together. So we talk about learn by doing, and we'll touch on that a bit next. But I think it's really important, this idea of circling back and always checking in on ourselves. we really want to make sure that we're reflecting on our practice and we're always growing and learning throughout. And able to grow throughout the process. So
yeah, and I think it's also it's definitely an opportunity for our clients and the practitioners that we work with to learn the craft of innovation design, but it's also an opportunity for us also to push our skills and by working also in different spaces, learn about different businesses and how innovation works within those spaces.
Yeah, so this learn by doing is really incorporating the two concepts that, in the end, they're augmenting one another. So on one way, we see that learning enhances how we apply the skills that we're the innovation skills. And then at the same time, while we're applying these innovation skills and capabilities that we have, we're also learning new things. So in order to, we're really, that learning aspect in a project is about going back and forth and constantly circulating around, growing and developing. And, we also think that, this learn by doing helps us to adapt our minds to new skills and new ways of thinking. It prepares us for what's on the horizon, whether we know what's on the horizon or not. And we think that also through this joined up team, we have different perspectives, and, we're all bringing these different perspectives into the project so that we actually are prepared for what's coming on the horizon as well. We just wanted to sort of drop in here one kind of consideration when you are doing this, because when you're doing, whether you're doing, the project or the team, there's always chances that it's not going to go perfect from the get-go. I'm going to say it's not really a chance. It's likely that it's not going to go perfect from the get-go. It's kind of part of the process. So what we like to do is we like to reframe failures into opportunities for learning. And it's really about allowing your organization to, what we call embracing the waste, and the waste being, the things that went wrong throughout the process, so that, as the project, you're learning from the waste, and as a team as well, you're also learning from that process of, hey, that might not have gone well. How might we continue to grow? And we see embracing waste as really about removing that pressure to deliver the right solution. There's, especially if innovation is a new practice within your business, there's a lot of pressure that first presentation, you've got a very tight deadline, and there's always this opportunity, and we say, let's embrace this and really reframe it as a learning opportunity.
Yeah, it's there's always this kind of the concept of efficiency that kicks in a lot of times in those conversations, and although maybe on the short term, innovation might not look like it's the most efficient way of delivering on short-term goals, but it definitely on the long run brings a lot of value. But we need to be patient and change a bit our perspective on what can be achieved within certain time frames.
Yeah, and learn from the waste as we go.
So yeah, building on this and talking about the type of challenges and also like the goals, if you want, on what needs to be achieved and when. We want also to set up a good challenge, a good juicy challenge for the work. So Heather had mentioned before that innovation is not a side of desk kind of work, and definitely the innovation projects cannot be side of desk. So the priority number one for us when we kick off the project is not about the ideas that sometimes we come into the process with, or that focus on generating solutions from the get-go. It's very important for us to understand the problem and really set up the right problem to solve. And that's basically, that requires time and effort more than we think. And ideas and solutions come at a later stage.
A lot of people sort of come into the innovation process because they have an idea. They're like, I have this idea for this new thing, right? And usually we say, that's great. Ideas are the easy part, right? It's really about saying, we might have an idea for something, but what is the problem and what is the real problem that we're trying to sort of solve for?
Yeah, and really those problems are obvious from the beginning. So sometimes we start the project with a specific problem in mind, but when we spend some time doing the research and really reflecting on what we are learning from the research, we realize that the problem is not as obvious as we think. And it's sometimes not the most meaningful problem. So there's always time to rethink and reshape that key question that we start with, so that we know we are solving for the right thing. And yeah, every meaningful innovation challenge or opportunity is unique in terms of what surprises and what things that it can surface and bring to our attention.
True innovation challenges have the complexity sort of under the surface.
Yeah.
I think that's how you've really got a good challenge to work on.
Yeah, and I think what we observe in the space is that sometimes people try to really simplify the problem so that they can solve it as like in one-day workshop, or sometimes they really attempt in one day to solve a very complex challenge. So this is where we see like a lot of patterns in the market of people trying to kind of run those like one-day event like hackathons or design jams. But they really like live in isolation from the real work, from the core essence of the daily work of the organization. So they live in a bubble, and they don't really have the resources and the real commitment to take what comes out of them or what goes into them to the next level, which is definitely a problem. Now, just so that we don't trigger any reactions, you also want to say that hackathons and design jams are also have their role. They can really serve specific goals, like testing maybe some tools or ideas with like multidisciplinary teams, or
it's good to build awareness with. It's a good approach to build awareness of innovation happening within an organization.
Yeah, so it's always good to have that kind of like one day where we can bring multi-stakeholders to do something together. But as Heather's saying, also like build awareness, like really there is a teach component of what innovation is and how innovation works. So as long as we have clear goals and realistic expectations for what these formats can serve, then it's all good. But there's a lot of work that goes before and beyond the hackathons and the design jams.
Yeah, and one-day sessions we use all the time as part of a greater innovation process, because it is a great way to get people together, and challenge and work on things together, as long as they're part of the real work that's happening.
So I think there's an invitation here for us to like move at least the definition of innovation beyond the one-day workshop, and really to set up true innovation projects in a more rigorous practice. And if we want to like really succeed and position innovation in the right way within the organization. So we want really to focus on projects that enable us to do the necessary activities that would get us to understand really our stakeholders, bring the insights from the research into our work, enable us to really go into spaces of co-creation where we invite customers and we invite stakeholders into the design process to build together and create together, and also focus on driving impact to the business that really takes us from the ideation space and the development space to really implementing the ideas and bringing them to the market.
All right. So, like we say, now that you've sort of set up the conditions, how do we get this innovation party started?
Yes, let's get started.
Let's get started. So we want to talk about, finding your champions and allies, because it's a really important way to get started. So creating the new, or, creating innovation within an organization, we really like to say it's a team sport. So effective collaboration across functions, up and down the organization. So really thinking about who should be involved, how might we involve them in the process, and making sure that we don't work in an isolated way. That's really key to the execution, because we are going from, all the way from that idea to implementation. So we really need to think across the business. And there's different ways that you can structure the team and cast an innovation team. We like to think about sort of having a core team, an extended team, and then, concerning what kind of support we might have. So in our core team, we look at, design lead with somebody that's an expert in the process and that holds that. And we look at the business lead as somebody who really knows the business and the challenges and the landscape within where the project is living within. And then we'll have different types of stakeholders that have different kinds of expertise surrounding the project and involved, at the right moments, if not throughout the whole project.
Yeah, so these will be like key players who really know different aspects of the business. And I think setting them up as like from the get-go as a core team, people who are involved in the process from the beginning, really sets up the project to like really move in the right direction without avoiding kind of the handovers and like leaving things without really approaching them, or and leaving like challenges or certain perspectives in the business without really tackling them till the end. So it really bringing people earlier in the process, sets up the process for better success.
And we have there, we also want to consider the senior leaders. So the people who might be decision makers. We also want to involve, even though they're part of the support team, what we call the support team, we want to involve them from the get-go so that they're part of the story and that there's buy-in along the way. So we want to talk about, beyond setting up the right team, we want to make sure that, it's important to find your innovation champions and allies. So who are those people? So, let's be real again. If you're just starting to bring innovation into your organization, so you've been tasked with, hey, you've got to do innovation, you likely won't have a large budget, ample amount of time, other resources in order to be involved. So this is where we actually want to jump into our very first poll question. So it's a chance for you guys to get involved and engage in the conversation a little bit. We want to get a sense of, who that's joined us today has the resources that you need for your innovation projects.
Yeah, so you should get the poll on the screen.
It should pop up there for you guys. It's there. We've got to do this. Here we go. So we're going to launch it. Poll number 1.
Okay, so we're going to leave it maybe for a minute as we get your responses. It's also like a fun way for us to know where you stand and how this question kind of resonates with you.
Yeah, so I think if we talk about resources, we're talking about, let's think about it in a broad sense of, budget is one thing. Make sure that you have the time within your business as well. And, maybe even people, like actual human resources. Who's there to support your team and join the team?
Great. And I think you got also the other question that we'll
we launched both of them. That's great.
Yeah, we'll touch on that at a later stage. So we're getting the results. So we're just going to give it maybe like a couple more seconds and then we can stop. And then
looks like there's a lot of some resources out there. So that's a good starting point. It's a good for us to get a sense of, how much momentum you might be able to gain. Great. So we're just going to sort of pause that. It looks like we don't see any more coming in. So thanks for joining us. And I assume that that we will get to the next question afterwards as well.
And poll, yeah. And if you're curious about the response for the first question, some has 57%, and for the rest, yes is the lowest. So
so we're out there looking for that. So that's good. Okay, we're going to dive right back in here, because we know that, if you've been tasked with innovation, you're going to be expected to spearhead like this new way of working. So, we really think you have to find some other champions in there who are willing to put in the hard work with you. Like we talked about how it's hard, so people who are not afraid to sort of roll up their sleeves, really fight the fight and get out there and really, make sure that they're sharing the work and open to talking about it and really going for it. Because, sometimes the work can be lonely, right? So you're the one out there spearheading, putting yourself out there, really talking about innovation and trying to make it happen. So find your allies, and these allies can help you remove barriers. They can help you hold space for the innovation work to happen, and for the learning to happen as well.
Yeah, I mean, depending on the context of the organization, sometimes we face resistance, skepticism, people who are not like easily brought into the process. So yeah, I mean, finding your people is quite important for you to like kind of keep going and maintain that momentum when you start the work.
Yeah, and so we really, we suggest finding people who have this higher tolerance for risk, who are comfortable with the waste that we were talking about, that they understand that it's a journey, and there's going to be some wins and there's going to be some things that we learn along the way. Especially people who have patience for the work to emerge without the pressure from the business. Quite often there's, timelines, you've got targets that you've got to meet, and, innovation work doesn't necessarily happen on the exact moment that you want it to happen. So it takes the time that it needs to take. And so to have some allies and champions that, have a similar mindset for risk and patience, it's really helpful.
So yeah, and then we definitely need to touch on culture. So I think innovation culture comes up a lot in conversations. So in this case, we wanted to talk about the level of readiness within your organization, and whether your teams are really set up to be supported by this overall mindset within the organization, and with the work that, or the people who will engage with the work. So, so whatever you are innovating, it will require people to accept and implement the outcomes. And bringing the new is inherent in innovation work. So which means that change is not something that we can avoid in any way. And change will come in different shapes and forms. So by default, innovation efforts are also considered efforts that bring change. So and again, that change might manifest on different levels within the organization. And yeah, let's be real again. Innovation is still not widely understood. So, and to be also very blunt about it, there is also stigma associated with innovation. So it depends on if you tried something or you invested in something that didn't really work, or if the innovation work took a bit longer to like really show value, or
maybe someone called something an innovation project like a buzzword, but it actually wasn't really anything new.
Yeah, and sometimes I think also, like, because we touched on a bit the design jams and hackathons, like we know that we sell sometimes design thinking or those kind of workshops as innovation, and people are like, okay, so we spent a day or we sent our team, but what's the tangible outcome? So there are really different reasons why people might not be super excited about the innovation as a term, or as a way of engaging with the challenges.
I think this is also a bit the change that we were talking about, is especially if you've done sort of one of these one-day workshops, maybe you've gone and gotten a training in design thinking or innovation work, and as soon as you finish that day or that moment, you go right back to your regular work, and you're trying to fit that in to the same process and the same systems. But it does require some change and some space. as well. So.
Yeah, and this is where we actually had our second question in the poll about, like, do you use the word innovation in your organization? So I know from the work that we do with our clients, sometimes innovation is within their mandate. It's something that they approach us with this kind of confidence and kind of a willingness to really push that agenda, and they want to really like put resources towards that, and they have the support. In other cases, we know that innovation is the word to be avoided. So we use different terms or different words. So I think in the poll we ran that some of you said, the most of the responses were that some of you actually use it, but it is confusing. And we agree. And this is why, like, when we started this, we wanted to also provide a definition for what we think innovation is, because it can take, again, different shapes and forms in different contexts. And for us, I think, again, moving beyond just ideations and new ideas to really implementing and demonstrating value is probably the key aspect that qualify certain effort or certain work as innovation.
Yeah, and it's really keeping innovation out of that buzzword space. It's making it, you know, really a thing. And so you know, like we said, depending on where your organization's at in their journey and their readiness, you know, maybe we've sometimes framed it as innovation, but sometimes we might avoid the specific term, but still actually do the work, right?
Yeah. So it doesn't, like, we don't care about the label. What we care about is the actual work and the actual results that we can demonstrate.
Yeah, and you know, gradually as you demonstrate the value of that work, you know, it's about turning those skeptics into allies, as we said, you know, into people who actually hold space for the work. And usually it happens as you demonstrate that value.
Yeah, and this is where I think, again, because we also asked about, you know, the resources you have, after demonstrating some of the value, you probably have a stronger case to actually ask for more resources and really bring more, like we talk about, buy-in, and building that momentum would be more possible. And yeah, so since we were talking about demonstrating value, I think talking about
it's good to talk about measurement. And you know, we really want to talk about measuring measuring what's important, because we can measure lots of things. And when we talk about innovation work, you know, usually within your organization there might be existing ways that you might measure, sort of KPIs, however you want to frame it within your organization, and that's important. So it's important to find a way to measure those things. But it's also important to measure what's important, what's important in the actual innovation project that you're doing. So inherently, the innovation work that you have has a wide array of risks, and you know, we're attempting a lot to predict the unknown, and so that you know, that's sort of risky business. We don't know necessarily where the project is directly heading. And so even though organizations tend to dedicate extensive resources to managing risks, uncertainty surrounding innovation, that's really the challenge, because you know, it's not in the nature of an organization to take risks, right? You know, they've got to deliver on value, and so that's, you know, that's going to continue to be a challenge. But as we measure, you know, the right things, then we can start to create, you know, a story and demonstrate the value of it. So we want to make sure that we're servicing assumptions early and identifying those risks. And you know, we talk about being ready to pivot and change as the conditions change. So it's really about having that mentality of saying, we need to sort of pick up and say, we've learned something, we need to keep going, we need to go in a different direction, and really dive into the other direction.
Yeah, and I think this also ties to what we said before, that we need to also embrace learning, like failures as learning, because it's also, that has value. And also, like, in its nature, like the design process that we bring also into the innovation work is iterative. So there is always that expectation that you need to redo things, build on things, modify, change as you go, because it is set to go that way, because and it's more effective that way, although we might not think about it this way.
Yeah. So, like we said, measuring what's important will help you demonstrate that value in order to grow and scale the scope of your innovation project, so the amount of budget and resources that you have, and the momentum that innovation can gain within your organization. So there's not really consensus among innovation experts on what it is that we should be measuring. However, not all innovation metrics are financial. So when we talk about measuring innovation, we talk about learning, we talked about the organizational capacity, innovation knowledge, innovation quality. We talk about the methods and tools that are being used, and how much sort of uptake there is in there. And we really think it's important to set up measures that are related to your own business and where your business is headed. So recognizing that, if we're looking at outcomes and we're looking at where the innovation project that you're taking on is going, measure a system of outcomes. And we talk about measuring a system of outcomes because, we want to make sure that we are covering multiple aspects of the business, so that, we're not putting all of our eggs into one basket, as you might say. So a couple examples of things you could include are, the non-financial things or the non-KPIs that you could include are, number of projects that are killed and money saved as a result. Hey, we've learned these things, and, so we've kind of moved on because we've learned from our customers that this might be not the most effective approach.
Yeah, and we tend to forget that we make a lot of decisions sometimes, and we use the research and in many cases to validate if something is worth investing in or not. Although sometimes we start the work with the assumption that we have the right idea or we have the right solution. So kind of learning from that and highlighting that as a key learning and something that not only
that's of value.
Yeah, pushed us in the right direction, but also it saved us the wrong investment.
Yeah, and I keep having this thread about learning, but really highlighting the lessons that we've learned both from the failures and successes along the way, because those are valuable things that can come into the next project. We can also talk about speed to the market. So I know we said that sometimes the innovation work can take time, but in the end, quite often you're into the market a lot quicker. Because you've done the work up front and throughout the process.
Yeah, and the nature of of the process that allows you to prototype, put things early in front of customers, of stakeholders, getting reactions. It builds confidence in knowing what the product or the final outcome should look like and really do for for the users when it is launched. So it kind of bridges that gap, and it becomes much faster. The level of readiness becomes much faster to really bring to the market.
And so you might actually start measuring the revenue related to the work itself, maybe the amount of new customers that that have joined or have come into to the work that you've done. We also like to look at measuring the staff capability to do the work and really to do the work well. Looking at the capability map. How is the staff? How are the people growing within this innovation work?
Yeah, because it is a continuous work. So it's not like we've done the project, we've put it out there, and we can leave it and go. So it requires really this kind of continuous involvement with the work. So for it to be sustainable, you really need to have the capabilities from within the organization. So making sure that your team is growing and able to really pursue the work is definitely a key metric to track and evaluate.
And also, on that note, talking about in the team and the people, but really looking at that culture. What is the readiness of the organization, and how is the organization shifting and the culture of the organization shifting as you're starting to do more and more innovation work? I think it's really important to start calling out these non-financial metrics in order to demonstrate the value beyond that and the value within your organization as well. So now that you've done all of this, you're getting some serious innovation momentum. What else is there?
So we want to talk about the innovation framework, and so it is something that is also quite complex, and it's quite key to do the work and do it right. And we know that in the market, there is a wealth of innovation tools and methods that are available, and sometimes knowing what to draw from and what are the right tools and what are the right strategies is quite challenging. And in the reality of the market today, a lot of the big organizations have either their own framework, or they've already been like investing in kind of building either like agile units or processes within the organization, or lean startup kind of drawing from that toolkit, design thinking. So we come across all of these things. Innovation kind of touches a lot of aspects of design thinking, service design, lean startup, agile, and even system thinking. So it is like the reality of the landscape out there. There's a lot of different ways of doing innovation, and it is quite challenging and sometimes confusing for people who are doing the work to know which one to use, how they overlap. And I think for us, or at least our take on this is like, you don't have to choose one. You can really make the most of all of them.
And not every project is the same. Every project you need to pull from that different toolkit, right? One project might, lend itself better to saying, hey, we need to be a little bit more agile. And one of them might require to take a little bit more of a systems thinking approach with a bit of agility. And so, we really work to find the way to make the most out of all of, the frameworks that are a part of this innovation landscape. And we think the most important thing is that whatever framework you choose to use for the project, that it's responsive and that it's iterative, that we're able to, learn as we're going through the project, because, innovation is unpredictable.
It is. So, and it's also one of the topics that we really enjoy talking about. So also we're putting out there an invitation. So next week we'll all be also hosting a conversation where we'd like really also practitioners and other people in the space to actually join us in the conversation. And we'll be interested to understand where you are at, what kind of frameworks do you use, what are the challenges of like really bringing all of these different toolkits together, but also what are the opportunities, and how we can really leverage these to do innovation work. And yeah, sometimes it might be bespoke, or sometimes it might be, or each project might require different things. So we're really interested in like picking your brains and getting to learn more about your experience. So we'll follow up and we'll invite you, for those who would like to join us and share with us like amongst practitioners, so we can learn from each other.
Yeah, I think it's exciting. So we want to wrap up.
Are we ready to do that?
Yeah, we're ready to do that. We're ready to wrap up. So while we're getting there, we've got a couple more things that we just want to wrap up, and then we'll have a chance for some questions and so on. So
yeah, send them through. If you have questions, feel free to share with us.
Yeah.
So yeah, so we wanted to leave you with a few words at the end.
Yeah, I think that, we want to touch on that, nurturing this culture that we talked about, that allows for and recognizes innovation within the organization and all its fuzzy and ambiguous glory, as it says there. We really think that's important. It's really important to nurture the culture.
Yeah, and creating a space for all the stakeholders to like really come together, create, fail, learn, iterate again. Will actually like really enable us to not only test the ideas, but also like really overcome any barriers we have as an organization. And yeah, it should be done in a safe zone. We have to like really acknowledge and accept the fact that there are risks associated with it. There's a certain level of uncertainty. We need to even like encourage us to like make those trials, even if we're not 100% sure that they work, like embracing those early failures as a way to learn and build confidence, and really figure out things as we go, which is a shift in our mindset within the organization. Is we think these are important things. So yeah, so we leave you with this question. Do your teams have what is needed to really embark on this journey? Like reflecting a bit on the conditions and the skills and resources that we talked about. It's really important to really set up your team and set up your organization to do this work and do it well.
Yeah. So that being said, it's time to talk. We see a couple sort of thoughts and questions coming through. So we encourage you. I see we have, you know, the better part of 10 minutes to have a conversation. And we're just going to pull up your questions here.
So I think we might need to stop sharing the deck to do that.
Okay, so we're going to stop sharing the deck. And we have some Q&A here, so you can see us a lot bigger, high definition. So go ahead, Simon. Do you want to take on the first one?
Sure.
Okay.
Let's pick one. So someone asked for the definition of the innovation again. We will share the deck actually, and the video will be available. So Jeremy, you will be able to get the blurb. And thanks. We're happy that you like it.
I just want to say that the most important thing about the innovation blurb is the part of, you know, implementation and creating value. Because, you know, when we talk about innovation, if we're only talking about the idea for the new thing, you know, you're really not getting to the core of what it can do for the business.
So I think we'll take the next question from Sean. So how much time should resources of a core team allocate for this type of activity? And
knowing they have a real job to do each day as well.
Yeah, so I think we're making a provocation here that it is the real job. So if you're taking on the innovation work or innovation project, it should be part of your core job. So again, it shouldn't be like a side project, the thing that you do on the side. So I think in the best conditions, or the best way to do it is to really claim that innovation project as part of your job, and so for you to be able to have focus and like really be able to drive the work and really demonstrate that value in a more substantial way. So we know that this might be ideal. In some cases, you might still have to kind of find ways to transition into that. So there might be like, but you definitely need to get approval on like really taking that and making it part of your job.
Yeah, you know, we'd love to talk more about it, and I think that could be also something that comes up in, you know, next week. We can, you know, maybe hear from other people about how they've been able to make space for this, so that it's not just side of desk. We've got a question from Ryan that says, you know, can you explain more about how you work with clients to choose the right framework or tools? In our organization, everyone seems to want a journey map. It's like having a hammer and seeing every problem as a nail.
That's a good one. Yeah, journey maps get a lot of love.
Yeah, they do. Absolutely. People love the journey maps. And it is a good way to sort of see the big picture. And, you know, I think it's about what you do with that. So quite often when we talk about our research, we don't just talk about insights, and we don't just talk about, you know, that journey map, but how can we action on it? So it's those design principles, it's those action points that we can pull from it, that then you can start to gain momentum. So great, journey maps definitely have a role in you know, the process,
but they're not enough.
Make it actionable. So, you know, how do we work with our clients to choose the right framework or tools?
So yeah, I think there are a couple of scenarios. Like sometimes, like for us as an innovation consultancy firm, we have our own process that we use. So with like specific phases, and within each phase, there's a bunch of tools and processes that we use. And in our work, we make sure that the clients understand what outcomes are, like what kind of deliverables we have for each phase of the work, and how the tools align and enable us to achieve those deliverables. But in other cases, like some organizations have their own framework, and a lot of them, like, they have a lot of similarities as long as they respect the principles of good innovation process. There is no preference. It's more understanding the opportunities and also the limitations of each tool, and really making those decisions as you go. And in most of cases, it's a combination of different tools to really achieve the desired outcomes.
Okay, so we've got a couple questions here coming in about, you know, how much time or resources should we allocate to the type of activity? And somebody was talking about here, well, innovation isn't something to be applied to solving to a problem in a one-day session. Great, glad you picked that up. How does it, how does it typically take to run through a complete and thorough process? So,
wow, yeah. It really depends.
It depends on the scope of the problem and the challenge that you're tackling. So, you know, if the challenge has, you know, is very systemic and has lots of, you know, lots of different tentacles in different parts of the business, you know, then it might take a little bit longer. We like to actually, even though the project might be, you know, a 3-year project, you know, break it up into chunks and talk about the process as we go, because we do want to make sure that we're iterative and that we're not saying we know where we're going in 3 years, but we do know where we're going in 4 to 6 months from now.
Yeah, and like kind of setting up like achievable and measurable outcomes is, I think, key. Because yeah, if the work takes time, you really need to still like deliver on things that show value and kind of keep that energy going. So it's really important to like really chunk them into like pieces. And I think it's also like the process itself is adaptive. So there are opportunities where we can speed up the work by putting more resources into it. But as Heather said, there are things that we can't also speed up. For example, there are periods that we like, for example, when we're doing synthesis, it's really not something that can be like squashed into one day. So there are things that where we can show possibilities in how we can speed up by bringing more like maybe teammates or choosing more less complex tools, maybe like also working a bit on the scope on what we need really and what we want. So there are conversations that we can have that gives you some flexibility, but overall I want to say like for like juicy projects, it takes time. It cannot be done in a week or 2. So our projects vary from sometimes like a month to 3 months to 6 months to sometimes a year, depending on the scope of the work and also the resources that are available.
So I see, I think a good follow-up question from Fabienne. Oh, hi Fabienne. So although I have found the allies within my organization, I have none with a creative background yet. That's great. How would you advise to take on the spearhead position as a standalone creative? So that's a really great question. And I just want to say that I don't know necessarily, you don't necessarily need to have only creative people on your team. So, you know, those allies and those champions quite often are business leaders. So we don't work with only creatives on the team. We work with people, you know, who have knowledge and expertise within the challenge space. And I always like to say that, you know, our job as creatives is to be able to find out, you know, how can everybody else join in a creative way that matches themselves. So, you know, I believe that everybody is creative, and it's our job to sort of say, okay, you know, not everybody's creative in the same way or with the same experience, and they might not be used to sort of flexing their creativity muscles. But, you know, we've really got to give them a chance to contribute to the process and with their own expertise. I don't know, maybe you have something else to add about that?
No, I think you.
No, okay, yeah,
great job. Okay, I have like.
We're trying to look at there's a couple that seem similar. We have about 5 minutes, so maybe we have time for 1 or 2 more questions.
So let's go for Charles' question. So what role does storytelling and building culture and alliances play in your process? Can you start with this rather than simply publicizing the innovation afterwards? Yes, and I would say storytelling is key, like read along the way. So it's not about just packaging the story and sharing the story at the end. I think one approach we use at the moment with our clients is to, when we have a project, and especially projects that take a few months, we from the get-go, we define or we identify certain milestones where we can go back and share with the wider team, the organization, some of the learnings. So we identify key moments where we can bring something of value to like really show people that demonstrate progress first, maintain that momentum, create more curiosity and more support. And I have to say we've been really successful with that, because as we do this work, as we introduce, like from the get-go when we do the kickoff where we introduce the process, for example, and set up expectations, and as we start delivering on these along the process, along the project, so the wider team who's not necessarily involved in the work or in the daily aspects of the work becomes really curious and more interested. And we get a lot of requests sometimes for people to join working sessions and
see what the work is really about.
So yeah, so they want to get more involved, and I think they also become the good channels to really go back to their teams, go back to their leadership, and tell the story, even when the story is not fully resolved or packaged at the end. So yes, we don't need to wait till the end. Don't wait to like kind of have the big reveal. Involving the people along the way and finding those strategic moments where you can give them something that would resonate, that would make sense for them, would be, I think, definitely a recommendation.
I think the other recommendation, you know, it seems simple, but it's really looking at, all right, what presentations do we have already scheduled within our organization, within specific teams, right? And really using those as opportunities and being able to sort of schedule ahead and say, hey, you know, how might we align some of our milestones to some of these projects? I think sharing along the way, you know, sure, you do miss that big reveal moment at the end, but I think we do like to avoid that because it shouldn't be a big reveal, because in the end, the more you share it, the more people, you know, are able to sort of share their expertise and perspectives in the project, which is, you know, always an added value as well.
Yeah, and yes, and exactly to that point, it speeds up the work. It enables us to like really move from just the ideation and the creation to implementation, and this is really key. And I think this also touches on Carolyn's questions about the executives and how to build buy-in. I think this strategy also works. So when we are inviting people into the process, we also find like moments where we like share back moments with the leadership team, because when they see their teams engage, when they see their teams like actually learning and doing the work and taking on those complex challenges, but also when they learn also along the way how our like problem framing is changing, our focus is changing, our value proposition is kind of coming together, they buy more into the work. And I have to say also, in a lot of cases, we start with like smaller scope, a kind of let's give it a try, see how this goes. And as we like really show and share those stories along the way, people get more excited and they bring more opportunities forward. So the project scope grows
as well.
and also like the impact of the work grows eventually. So that's really exciting for us as practitioners, but also for the people who are driving the innovation efforts within the organization.
I think another thing that we've done in the past is we've actually invited the executives to come to customer sessions, for example, if we host them in the evening, and, you know, giving them the chance to sit there at the table and actually have a conversation and engage. They realize, you know, that the process and the approach of you know, listening to people and being able to actually have those conversations, they see the immediate value of that work. And then, you know, once they've done that, then they see, you know, how the work has been sort of synthesized and understood and translated into value. They start to see that connection and the direct value of the work. So sometimes just getting them in there to get their hands dirty, you know, take their suit and tie off and join us in the field, then, you know, quite often that's successful as well.
So it's 3 o'clock. I know we still have a lot of questions, but we'll promise to kind of reach out to those who did not get the chance to answer their questions.
And next week, maybe next week what we'll do is we'll actually start with those kinds of questions to get our discussion rolling.
Maybe you can use some of these questions to prompt the conversation.
Yeah.
So we'll follow up with you guys. Thank you for tuning in and for joining us.
And for engaging so well. It was really great to, you know, have a one-sided conversation. Thank you so much.